Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our Preparing Students for the APCSA Exam and FRQs webinar today. We're really going to be focusing more on FRQs today. We have another webinar coming up in the next few weeks for the Preparing Students for the APCSA exam. We'll let everybody get settled. I recognize a lot of names. Welcome. It is so good to be back with all of you. So while we're waiting, I believe you should have access to chat. And just a couple of things. This is a little bit different format. This is not a workshop. This is going to be a webinar. And so there are a few things that will be disabled. You won't be able to unmute and ask questions. However, we do have a Q&A section. So if you've got questions, please don't hesitate to click on the Q&A and ask those questions. And while we're getting settled in, we love to know where you're joining us from. So if you could go ahead and open up chat and tell us where you're joining us from, that would be great. We love to meet our CodeHS educators. I have a grumpy puppy who is in this webinar with me, and there's going to be barking in just a moment. I'm going to mute for a sec. Very timely of FedEx to stop at my house now. All right. I see you're all dropping your intros into chat. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Brandy. Welcome, Larry. Welcome, John. They're going to bark again. Hang on. Welcome, welcome. So glad you could join us today. Hi, Christy. It's good to see you, Christy. Just happened to see your name. Awesome. Hey, Julia. Sorry. I know it's going to be a battle. Hang on one more second. Somebody tell a joke while I have to keep muting. My goodness. I think they know it's their dog food getting delivered, so I think they're leaving. Yes, it is Carol. Carol's getting his big box of dog food, so there's that. Okay. I think I'm safe now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, everybody, for sharing where you're from. Hey, Robin. So your videos will not be able to be seen. I do believe we have it set up, so you're really just going to be seeing the host and the panelists today. So sorry about that. We do love to see all of you, but I promise you we can see who is in our webinar right now. So a couple of quick things. Please remember that if you've got any questions, we do have the Q&A available. So if you could go ahead and click on Q&A to ask any questions. We have some amazing CodeHS team members who are hanging out with us today. We've got MR, wave to everybody. We've got Lindsay, and they are going to be helping answer questions and keep us on track. So please toss all your questions in there, Adam. I say type them really fast. Let's see how fast they can keep up. That was not nice of me. Sorry, guys. Love it, love it, love it. You will also be getting a copy of this recording after the webinar is complete. You'll get the recording. You'll also get a copy of the slides as well with all the links. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to introduce our amazing teacher trainer, Gary Vanderlinden. We've got Gary with us today. He has been teaching APCSA for I don't know how long, Gary. A while.
Yeah, probably 8 years.
8 years. So we have a veteran APCSA teacher, and Gary is going to be showing us and talking about some of the ways that we can help prepare students and how FRQs are scored. So we really know how to help prepare our students to take those. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. So you can grab the slides right here, right now. I'll leave this slide up for just a moment. And I think somebody, yep, MR just tossed this link into chat. So if you'd like to grab the slides, you can scan the QR code. If you're not in a good place to actually click the link, that's totally fine. Or you can click the link that's in chat, codehs.com/CSA exam-FRQ-prep. And that will take you to the slides. There's a bunch of goodies in there. We kept packing it full of tips, and I'm certain we won't get through all of them today. So I wanted to make sure you've got all of those available to you. All right. And I'm pretty certain most of you are already CodeHS educators. However, if you are not, please go ahead and take a moment to sign up for a CodeHS educator account. You can browse to codehs.com/sign-up to create an account. We will not have a demo workshop section for this webinar today. But again, you've got all the links to all of the different resources that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so just briefly, what we're going to be taking a look at again is APCSA, all things APCSA. We're going to take a quick look at the whole APCSA exam breakdown, a little bit of a look at some of the review resources, and then I'm going to pass it over to Gary so he can talk about how about the FRQs, understanding the FRQs, including that scoring and some review tips. Okay, so APCSA exam breakdown. So the exam itself for this AP course is Wednesday, May 3rd at 12 p.m. local time. So whatever time zone you're in, 12 p.m. local time, Wednesday, May 3rd is when this exam happens. There are two parts to this exam. There is the actual exam part of this, and there is the FRQ part. I'm just going to go over a little bit about this breakdown before we toss it over to Gary. So when we're looking at the exam itself, that multiple choice exam, that is part one or section one of the APCSA exam. So there are 40 questions in section one. It's all multiple choice. Students have 1 hour and 30 minutes to complete this part. This section is worth 50% of the student's final exam score. Section two, the free response questions, part Gary's going to go over, is 4 questions. So 4 questions, you've got 1 hour and 30 minutes. That is also 50% of their exam score. So each of these are weighted for half of the test. So that section one for the multiple choice, some of the question topics are going to include some of the programming fundamentals, data structures, some logic, algorithms and problem solving, and of course, object-oriented programming and recursion. And this is something kids are really going to have to think about how long they're spending on each of those questions, even though they might be thinking that it's only 40 questions, they've got 1 hour and 30 minutes. It's going to go fast. They're still going to have to pace themselves as they go through all of those questions to make sure they can get those answered. Section two, the topics are going to, for the FRQ section, is going to include FRQ 1, methods and control structures. FRQ 2 is going to focus on classes. FRQ 3, arrays and array lists. FRQ 4 will focus on 2D arrays. And that will be in those 4 FRQ questions. Now, keep in mind also for both of these, I believe it is both section 1 and section 2. These are not taken on the computer. These are good old handwritten tests. So this is something that students are not going to be used to more than likely. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind as you're helping students prepare for these exams. Remind them and have them do their reviews on paper so they can start to get used to that process. So overview of the CSA exam, you're going to see these kind of exam weightings for each of the different units. This unit should look, or these unit breakdowns should look really familiar for APCSA. So you'll see that some of the first ones, so unit 1 with primitive types is going to have a pretty low weighting. And keep in mind that unit 3 and unit 4 are definitely going to be weighted a little bit higher. you're going to want to take a look at all of these to help your students understand what to prepare for and to help them prepare for all of these different units. So a few review resources before I turn this over to Gary. So CodeHS has a ton of resources, and we want to make sure that you are not forgetting about any of these. So first of all, we do have, of course, Nitro and Mocha courses. We've got an APCSA review course, some practices, questions of the day, FRQ Center. So keep in mind with the Nitro and Mocha courses, you're more than likely using Nitro. I think most APCSA teachers do use that one because it's aligned to the College Board. But Mocha can often still be a really good resource to review. I know long time ago when I was learning Java, I actually went out to our Mocha course to help myself understand some of those concepts that I just wasn't getting. So that might be something helpful for your kids as well. There is also a nice little APCSA Hub that you can take a look at. So if you browse to codehs.com/APCSA Hub, it's going to take you out to CodeHS's page that has all things APCSA on it. So this is going to be a great page just to bookmark if you think, all right, there was something I needed and I don't know where it was at. You can certainly jump out to this hub to take a look for any of that. So again, that was at codehs.com/APCSA Hub. Oh, let's see. Okay, we just talked a little bit about the Nitro and Mocha courses. And there's also the APCSA review course as well. So don't forget that in the course catalog, there is a separate review course available. Now, you don't have to set up a separate course or a separate section that has just that content. You can actually add that content right into your AP course. So it's right there for students. They can access it right away. And I think I have it pulled up somewhere. Yes, I do. So here is our APCSA review course. So you can access that and add that right into your courses. And you can review straight from this course. This is going to be a really helpful tool as you start preparing your kids to take this APCSA exam. You can see all of the check for understandings are going to be in one spot for kids to go through. This is going to be very helpful. So definitely grab that APCSA course. All right, and we've got the CodeHS practice problems. I feel like this is something that often gets forgotten when we're thinking about how to help our kids prepare for the APCSA exam. So when you are working with your kids, keep in mind that you can always click on practice up here in the top navigation bar, and you can choose Java to see all of these additional activities and exercises here. So remember, one of the things, let's see, we know 2D array is going to get covered. So maybe we need a few more examples for kids to work through. We can grab these exercises here, and you can actually click on these dots and assign them, or you can assign the entire group at once to your course. So again, this is something that you can add right into your course. Kids don't have to come out to find it, but you can build that right in here. Let's see. Whoops, let me put my slides again. There we go. And the question of the day. If you have not checked out the question of the day, you definitely want to do that. And I should have grabbed the link for that, but MR or Lindsay, if you've got the link for the question of the day or to subscribe to that, that would be awesome. Toss that into chat for me, please. But this is going to be a really nice way to, it's a nice icebreaker for the start of class. And if you're using the icebreaker in a different way, definitely let us know. I'd love to hear how you're using it in your classrooms. And the FRQ Center. I'm not going to get into this too much right now, but the FRQ Center is going to be a fabulous resource to help your kids prep for the FRQs. What I will point out is how to get to the FRQ Center. So if you are in your sections, you can click on Toolbox. And then under Resources, you're going to see APCSA FRQ Center. So again, Toolbox, Resources, APCSA FRQ Center. And this is going to be a great place to come to take a look at some example FRQs. You can have kids try it. You can also view a playlist. I think I already had that pulled up. So you can actually see each of these individual FRQs. What's really nice, I'll just give a quick overview of this just in case we run out of time. So what's really nice is you do have a text-only version and you have a runnable version. So we all know that kids are not going to have the option to compile their code when they are writing when they're writing their code, especially handwriting it. So the text only is going to be something you want to work up to, but you've got both of those options here. And we have a ton of different groups that you can join as well. And we'll make sure that you have all of these links available so you can join those as you would like. All right, so I'm going to stop talking. I want to turn this over to our expert APCSA teacher, Gary. I'm going to have you go ahead and start taking us through this section.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm not sure about being the experienced APCSA teacher, but I am older and I have taught this for a while, so I guess that works. Lori, let's go ahead and move forward. So, excuse me. You know, the first thing that jumps out to me here is, and I'll just go back to the multiple choice, I know it's not highlighted, is if you do the math, it's 2 minutes per question. And most of the time, that's tough to get the students to understand that and to be able to think through that. So that's for a different webinar, but just as an FYI. On the pre-response, yeah, there's 4 questions and they all think, oh, that's no big deal, unless there's 3 to 5 parts for each one. And so never think that it's only 4 questions. If you've not been through this before, you understand, you will have to understand that there's multiple parts for each of them. Okay, next slide, please. Here's an example where it's showing the 2 parts as an example. And the key thing to understand, I think, is that whatever you do in part A is standalone. When you get to part B, most of the time, if there's things you could use from part A, they will tell you, go ahead and assume that what you wrote works. And you can use that then in part B. So they're independent. You don't have to make sure that you did part A right and then, oh my gosh, I can't use it in part B. Okay, next slide. All right, so I thought we'd take some FRQs and just kind of dive a little bit into them. And I don't have any idea of the experience level of everybody on the webinar, but let me just kind of dive into this. I really believe that the students need to learn how to read the problem before they start thinking about picking up the pencil and writing. And so in this particular example, it's just kind of simple, as talking about implementation of the climbing club method add climb. So that obviously says I'm going to be writing a method that stores the climb info objects in the order they were added. Well, that kind of jumps out that says, hey, there's something called climb info as an object. So somewhere in the code, there's going to be an object that's called climb info. And in the order they were added, that would tend to me sort of beginning to sound like some kind of an array list, and it's being added at the end. Now, this implementation of add climb should create a new climb info object. Well, that's called instantiation. And so they have to be able to figure out, how do I instantiate a new object and receive the parameters and instantiate the object with that information. And then it appends a reference to that object to the end of the climb list. From this, I can't really tell whether it's an array or an array list, but the word appends belongs to array list. So I would go, probably that's what they are thinking. So again, the whole concept is for them to read and begin to formulate ideas in their mind before they pick up the pencil and start writing, because otherwise I find students will start trying to solve the problem and then they will not really be focusing on what is it I'm solving. So that's just a thought on that. Next slide, Lori. Yeah, this is a tough one. I don't know where I teach, we have blocks of 90 minutes, and which works out fine for practice tests, right? And invariably, they just don't get it done in the 90 minutes, no matter how many times we try. Also, they need to understand they don't have to be real neat. If you cross out work, the grader just looks past it. All right, next slide, please. Now, again, try to solve all the parts. And again, this is just talking about where if you have different parts, each part stands alone. And so you don't want them to feel like, well, I really didn't understand how to do part A or whatever, and therefore I shouldn't do B and C. Not at all. They might find the other parts are simpler or more understandable to them. So they should really think about each part independently. Next slide, please. I don't know about your students, but I have a few students that know a little bit more about Java than what we would teach in a CSA course. And when they're trying to solve some of the problems I might give them, all of a sudden I'm seeing some examples of classes that are outside the scope of the CSA exam. So again, they really have to focus in on understand. I think we're going to talk about the guidance here in just a second, but they really have to focus on only using classes and methods that they are given. They can't use all of the CodeHS, or not CodeHS, all of the Java methods out there. Okay, next slide, please. Now, take another stab at a FRQ, and I'm going to try to drill this down just a little bit. And again, because of the format we're on, it's kind of difficult. I would prefer that we do this almost like a workshop where you could engage and be a part of it, but I'll just be the talking head. So again, it really quickly talks about, it involves cargo ships that carry a specific number of cargo, containers, etc. Excuse me. If we could go to the next slide, Lori. So what you will see I've done is I try to encourage them to underline or circle or whatever to identify things in the writing. This is before you start writing the code, to see if that would maybe drive their thinking differently. And so one of the things I underlined here was you can see the details in the ship class. Well, my gosh, you better go look at that before you start writing code so you understand that. That also tells me that the ship class sounds like an object from what I can tell up here. But then in part A, you will be completing the next to unload method. That's important. This takes no parameters. So I'm starting to write the method signature already, at least in my head. I know the method name, takes no parameters, so I know it's open and close parentheses after the method name, and it returns a ship. Oh, the ship is a class. And so my return type is ship from the ship's instance variable. That kind of sounds like there's some kind of an array or an array list going on. So very quickly, I begin to formulate some concepts going on here. And then it goes into the details about the highest percentage of the cargo hold filled. But then it says return the first ship with that percentage. And then it goes into some other characteristics that we just don't have time to go into. But the point being is to read through it and get a good grasp of what the problem is before we start picking up the pen. We could go to the next slide, please. So this one is the class that we're writing the method in. You can see the method there towards the bottom next to unload. That's what we're supposed to complete for part A. And so I was showing that, but notice there is the private ship array list shown at the top. So there it is. Okay, next slide, please. And then here's the ship class, and there's more to it. I just only did one slide. So you can see the methods it has and the instant variables it has, etc. So that begins to kind of help understand what you're going to write. Now, the next page or slide is the answer slide. I thought I would just include that so that we could all look at it And they really don't want a whole lot of extraneous kinds of stuff given. A lot of times that will actually cause problems. And so, you know, and again, they're not going to take points off, but like in this case, we got double max capacity inside the for loop. One could argue that that should be outside the for loop as a like an instance variable or whatever. They're not going to argue over that unless there was some specific direction. But again, what they're looking for in this case is you are going to go through the ships array based on the length. And in this example, and they could implement it differently, but they start with I of 1 because if you look through the code, the first one is basically, if you notice, max up there is set to 0. So they're just trying to find a way how to keep track of which element has the largest capacity, and that's who's the ship you're going to return. And so they're just really trying to understand, are they able to get to the ships? Do they understand how to get to the ship element in the array using max or square bracket I, and use the method to then calculate the percentage? So that's really what this this FRQ is all about. Down at the bottom, you can see what they're doing here, and they're just basically, one of the constraints was that the current hold had to be greater than 0. Otherwise, you didn't then you could return it, but otherwise return null. So that's what's going on in here. I know that's quick, but I'm just trying to maybe bring out some points. Okay, Lori. Now, in scoring it, and this is kind of a mixture here between, I'll say, CodeHS and College Board. When you start assigning, I'll say, College Board assignments to the students, and you go to score them, you're given this kind of material when you go to score online. And unfortunately, you can do it manually. Most of us are going to use the College Board online portion to do this, which is a little bit of a issue because it does have to be manually when they get to it. So I usually start out having them do it on the computer, just on College Board, where they type it in and then move to just paper. But it goes through and kind of gives you where to add points or take away points. And if you do it on the College Board site, then it gives you a checklist at the bottom of what points you want to give the student for their work they did. And it shows you their preferred solution, so you can sit there and compare. You don't have to just make it up in your own head. It's pretty useful that way. Okay. Next slide, please. Again, this is another example where it's showing several parts and the points that get added, or in this case, what they're looking for them to do. And what they're really trying to focus on, if you look at some of this, is that they, for instance, the third or fourth one down says +1 calls get title on download info object from download list. There are specific things they're looking to see if the student understood how to do. And you're going to see in a minute a whole bunch of stuff that they really don't care much about that you and I probably think they should. But these are the specifics that they want to see. The last one, returns reference to matching object if present, null if not. And again, that's what they're trying to get. So as an example, this type of a problem, I've had students, instead of doing a return, would do let's say a system.print. Well, that doesn't fly because the method signature will show a return type. And that's kind of where I wouldn't say I have a hard discussion with the students, but it's kind of like, you got to look at the method signature and make sure everything is matching up. And so it's important that they understand that what's required in terms of return type or parameters coming in. Okay, next slide. Oh, we can go to the next one. Next one. Okay, again, another example. This time it's just talking about must use string equality check, dot equals, right? versus equal, and things like that. Okay, next line. I'm just trying to keep my eye on the clock here a little bit. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. My phone is going nuts here. The penalty points where they take away is, for instance, like an array or an array list, access gets confused. So if they are expecting an array, they expect to see it with square brackets and the index number. Or with an array list, they would expect to see .get or whatever. This next one is a tough one, at least with my students. Sometimes they get so much extra code that has no meaning, and that's really a detriment to them on the exam. Local variables used but none declared. Again, they probably won't care so much where you declared it as long as it's within scope. And again, that's the other thing is, with Java, obviously the scope is a critical element to this. And so if you are going to declare a local variable, let's say inside of a for loop or something like that, or even a method, you better not be using it somewhere else, or that will take the point off, because the scope of that variable doesn't persist across the whole construct then. And void method or constructor returning a value, again, understanding the method signature, what is going to be returned, if anything. And so don't try to return something if the type is void. Most of the time, they will give you the method signature. Okay, next slide, please. So again, they will apply the question scoring criteria, obviously, first, and then they're only deducting from earned point. So you can't end up with a negative score, if that makes sense. And you can only have 3 penalty points per question. Okay, next slide. Now here's things, and I'm not going to take time to go through all this. There's a whole bunch of things here that says no penalty, but at the same time, that first one, extraneous code with no side effect, I'd be very careful about that, because I have seen where that has had an impact before. But the others, when you see about, missing public qualifier or keywords or even square brackets and parentheses, they kind of overlook most of that. And I try myself not to really spend much time on this slide with the students, because I don't want them going in there thinking it can be sloppy. Okay, next slide. The quick reference guide is so important. I hand this out on day 1 of the class, and I'm lucky if anybody can find it anymore. But this really then, for instance, we just pick on strings there for a minute. Those are the only methods of strings you can use. That's it. And yeah, there's other ways you could solve something, but those are it. The same thing when you get down to, I'm not sure if that's my building or some other building. I kind of hear like an alarm going off. So if you go on down through that list, you see all the things that they can use. And so it's critical that they become so ingrained with this. Yeah, they get it at the day of the test, but that's not the day they should learn to look at it. Okay, next slide. I just saw one message come up on there, and I'm going to respond to it online. Yes, that is true. If they use a method that's not contained on the quick reference guide, they will have points taken off. Absolutely. So not that they would be asked to write, let's say, a sorting method, but instead of, like they could use collections, right? But that's not on the list. So that's an example. There's only certain methods of string that you can use. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, do we want to take a moment and talk about any questions that have come up, or do you want to go ahead, Lori?
I'm just taking a quick look to see if there are any questions we should answer right now. Why don't we keep going, right?
Okay.
Unless Lindsay or MR, have you seen anything we should address?
Well, yeah, we have one open question in the Q&A about how to find ways to utilize the quick reference guide as a practice. Like, do you use that in class as a practice on free response questions, and how do you do them?
Yes. For instance, right now, I'm still letting them use things online a little bit over the next few weeks. Obviously, we're just for the paper. So a lot of times what I'll have them do right now, because they don't carry paper much anymore, is I'll have them open up a tab with a quick reference guide in it while they're doing the FRQ in a separate tab, so that they absolutely get used to using it. And of course, they ask the same question that probably some of your students will. Well, why can't I, use this or whatever? Anything else, Lindsay or MR?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Lori, next slide then. And Lori, do you want to cover this, or do you want me to?
I can go ahead and point to where you can find this again and just point out a few things, and then
And then
Gary,
I can talk to some more of it if you need.
yeah, absolutely. So again, make sure you're taking a look at the CodeHS FRQ Center. This is going to be a really great resource to help you help your kids prepare. So I'm going to jump out to the site again. So as I sign into CodeHS, if I take a look at the navigation bar across the top of the page and I click on Toolbox, this is one of the ways you can find the FRQ Center. So from Toolbox, under Resources, you can see APCSA FRQ Center right here. So that is going to take you out to this page. And this is going to be a great place for your kids to practice these FRQs. So again, you can see the questions and you can see a scoring guide here as well. So that's going to be super helpful. Gary, I'm going to take a pause if there's anything you want to add here.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, these are so important for practicing, because students may, let's say on the MCQ, they might know the concept. It's very different when you have to actually put it into a solution. And so I personally favor FRQs over MCQs only because they then have to actually code it. And I hope that the knowledge then goes back into just understanding in a standalone environment, but it's so important to have them understand from a coding standpoint.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess my answer would be write programs, write programs, write programs.
Yes.
Use the FRQ, but coding.
For sure.
I saw the question about, I'm sorry, Lori,
No,
about
go ahead.
these overlap. Some of them do, but not many. The question was, do these overlap with the AP Computer College Board FRQs? Not many of these do.
Gotcha. Okay. So again, definitely take a look at this. And we also, let me open that in a new tab. You can also get to the link that have the link right here in the APCSA FRQ Center for accessing the AP side of it as well. So you can get directly out to the AP page that has all of the free response questions and scoring information archive here too. All right.
We had one more question come in about do they get the quick reference guide with the paper exam? Do students get the quick reference guide?
Yes, they do.
Great. Thank you.
Excellent. Is there any others? Let's see. So let's see. Larry asked, if we assign progress checks, both MCQ and FRQ parts, will we be overloading students? What do you think about that one, Gary?
you have to judge that a little bit. I know this doesn't sound like the crisp answer you probably wanted, Larry, but you know your students better than anybody else. So you have to balance that a little bit. At the same time, this is such a critical, if they're in this class, and hopefully they're doing it because they want to take the AP exam and it's maybe part of their career plan. So in that case, I would say, even if they work on the FRQs with neighbors, and share and care, excuse me, I find that okay, because as long as they're engaged, I'm not too worried about that. You have to separate in your head, in my opinion, grading for your school system from practicing for the exam. Because if all you're doing is doing the work so they can get a grade, that's all they're going to do. And you really want this to be more about the learning. And so I'm not sure that I have the solution to that, but I really focus on trying to separate that concept. And so that they aren't so nervous about doing an FRQ and failing. Because by maybe not getting it to work, they're going to learn. Whereas if it's for grading, they've got to have it right so they can get that 98. Larry, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I try to do as many of these as I can. I'm not so worried about the overloading because it's not for a grade.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to make. If you are making it a bit less low stakes on your end, at least for your grading purposes, they can focus on that bigger picture. What's the ultimate goal for it? So I really like that approach. I think that's a really good strategy. I'm just going to take a quick peek. Looks like Lindsay's answering a question. If anybody has any thoughts, let's see, Jessica was asking, and that was about that, about the quick reference guide. If anybody in our audience has thoughts about how you use the quick reference guide, how you help students get used to it, and how to understand using it, go ahead and toss that into chat. This is a really good time for us to network as well. So please share your ideas about how you use quick reference guide. I think that can only help us all. So I'd love to do a little crowdsourcing on that. There was a couple of other questions that I wanted to make sure, just to make sure everybody knows that were already answered, but somebody asked, do you have to have the pro version to access this? You do not have to have the pro version to access any of the resources that we're sharing today. I believe that is correct. Lindsay or MR, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's all available on free. So FRQ Center is available to free teachers. Both Nitro and Mocha are available to free teachers. The courses are available to free. The ability to customize your course and pull in that content is available for free teachers as well. So these are all free resources. Yes, let's see. And I thought there was one more thing. The difference between Nitro and Mocha. Nitro is the course that is aligned with the College Board. So that's probably the course that you've been using. It follows that structure. Mocha, let's see if I remember this right. It does not follow that same structure. And I believe it introduces objects later in the course. Got it. Okay, cool. And there's also a difference with the main method, I believe. It's using run as opposed to main. And there's a difference in the way input is used, I think. Yep. Okay, Lindsay shook her head yes. So I got them all. I think those are the main differences. But yeah, if you do decide to jump over to Mocha, make sure to be aware of that main method. You're not going to see main in Mocha, you're going to see run. So as long as students understand it's essentially, the main method, but it's just going to be seen in a little different way. So awesome. And yes, we will absolutely share out this recording and the slides. So you've got all of these links as well. We don't want to give you a bunch of links and then say, yeah, I hope you wrote them down. You will definitely get them from us. So let's see. I know we broke down the FRQ Center more. Definitely, we're going to leave all of these in here. We're also going to add a few more tips and tricks at the end because we've just got so many tips and tricks that we have been collecting over the years. So we'll definitely include all of that for you as well. There are the runnable versions of the FRQs that we have in the FRQ Center. And this is something Gary and I were talking about before we started the webinar. Yes, your students are going to need to write code that cannot be compiled. So that is the point you want to get them to. If you need to have students start with a runnable version, that's okay too. This is a great scaffolding tool to get them to the point where they're ready to write that code. But remember, they have to move beyond this. So keep that idea in mind. So it's great that there is this runnable version. Really helpful, great tool to scaffold kids into that, but remember to help move them beyond that as well. Gary, did I say that correctly?
Yes, and I was just going to add to that. I don't know if anybody on the webinar has actually been a AP reader for the CSA exam. It sure doesn't hurt to have the students have legible writing and not, all over the page type of writing. That is a real challenge because it's human beings that is grading this. And so I would strongly encourage them to not have hieroglyphic handwriting.
And it's a challenge for me at this point. I love handwriting, but I type more than I handwrite, and my handwriting has gone downhill. So it's a good thing to have them practice, I think.
Gary, we've had a couple questions just to confirm that if there's a method that's not on the quick reference, like if students are used to using the 2-parameter version of index of, but the quick reference just has the 1 parameter, they should only use things that are on that quick reference guide.
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you for confirming that. All right. So we've got all those FRQ things. Remember that review course is right there as well. Do we have any additional questions? Any tips to improve my students' handwriting practice? I wonder if something like maybe an APCSA teacher out there has some other tips. But I think for myself, it might be an interesting activity to have students handwrite something and then hand it to another student and have them read it, see if they can understand it.
Yeah, I just saw that note come through, and that's a great exercise.
Yeah. Oh, Jessica, I like that too. Had students do a handwriting assessment and gave them feedback. Yeah. Spacing between words, lines are slanted, too small. Totally. Absolutely. I just deciphered a whole lot of handwriting myself a couple days ago and had no idea what some of it was. So, poor first grade teacher. Love it. John mentions it's a great idea. Do you think it helps to have them grade each other's FRQs? Yes. What do you think, Gary?
I do. As long as they're being honest with each other, and I'll just take that in the context. It's not about let's get this task done so we can move on to something else. If they really will take the time to have the interchange about what's going on, it is powerful. Those few nuggets that I will find where 2 students are talking about it, you just want to capture and somehow have everybody breathe that air because that's when they really learn. I hate to say it, but they probably don't learn as much from me as they will from each other. And so when the 2 students will sit there and discuss a problem, that is probably the most powerful thing that will happen in the classroom.
I am going to clip that recording of you saying that because I think I could not agree with you more. I think that is really powerful. Really, really powerful. Let's see, are there other questions? I don't.
Yeah, I think we got a good one for a first-year CSA teacher. Any tips for a first-year CSA teacher to become more proficient at answering students' questions? So for a new teacher to kind of get ahead of that a little more, especially for students who know more than the teacher at that point?
I don't know that I have any magical answer, but you know, there's a case where if you think the students actually may know something beyond your own knowledge, let them figure it out, and you be the guider, not the solver, because you know, and again, I'm just taking this totally out of context, but you know, they often, at least my students often, when they're working on a problem, they will come to me and say, I don't know how to do this. Well, okay, you're in an AP class. Your task is to figure it out. I don't maybe quite that blunt, but well, what did you learn? What's the problem? What's the issue? And so my take would be, I personally, while I'd like to think I know all the answers, I know I don't. I really try to push back on the students and just ask questions and force them to find the answers. I don't know if that is useful for your question, but that's how I would approach it. And back in the day when I was first doing this, that's how I kind of got into it. Plus, I always tried to do whatever problems I'm asking them to do, I would try to do myself ahead of time.
And John mentioned something similar to that in chat. When students ask something beyond my knowledge, or even if I do know it, I throw it out to the class and we all work through it together. I think that's so important. I know when I was, when I was still in the classroom, and even now, if I'm asked a question and I don't know the answer, I'm very forthright about that.
Mm-hmm.
We are all one learning community. And so that's not a bad thing to admit that. One quick question here too. Let's see. Is inheritance tested under Q2?
It could be. Not every year, but it certainly could be. And only from the standpoint where normally I'll just say, I haven't seen where they would have like, you know, extends, you know, parent child. It's typically not there. I have seen it 3-4 years ago. Typically it's going to be more about having an object and being able to instantiate it, add it to an array or an array list, and use methods in it versus what we would consider either polymorphism or inheritance. I don't see that often.
Gotcha. So I just have to say that I love so much seeing all these tips come in from everybody. I think this is amazing. This is wonderful. And I love seeing the general growth mindset in this group. Everybody's very much about, hey, we're going to make mistakes, not going to have all the answers. And somebody even said, learning together is fun. We laugh at ourselves and at me. I could not agree with you more. Learning together is fun. And if you don't take yourself quite so seriously, it's even better yet. You show your kids that, hey, we're gonna make some mistakes along the way, but it's okay. We're gonna learn together. So love that. You all are awesome.
The only other little tidbit I would throw out, and it's a little late in the year for this, but you might think about it going forward, is I have tried each year to have I'll call it a master project that I have the students build throughout the year. Typically I use like a Salesforce type of problem, not Salesforce the system, but the salespeople, inventory, things like that. And I try to weave the concepts into that approach. Therefore, when we're talking about instantiating, we can talk about instantiating some objects, or if we're talking about building an array list, you know, we can do it with stuff that we're constantly working. So I had a student earlier in the year say, well, how many phases of this are we going to do? The last phase we have done is 24. And so we just kept adding and adding and adding to it. And that's almost like doing constant FRQs almost. Now, that's not a cure-all. I don't mean that, but that's just a concept versus what I call standalone exercises. Not finding any fault with the CodeHS exercises. That's how you learn. But then to take that and then apply it.
Yeah. All right. Other questions from anybody? And if you've got other questions, what I would say is absolutely don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask. We would absolutely love to help you with any questions you have. You will have our email addresses, so we'll make sure that that's included in the slides here. Definitely let us know what questions you have, and we're happy to help and help you however we can. So couple of things that I wanted to make sure to mention also, and I forgot to put this in the slide deck, so we'll make sure we list these as well in the follow-up email. But we do have more AP workshops coming up. I know oftentimes if you're an AP teacher for one class, you might be an AP teacher for a couple more. So we do have an APCSP workshop coming up on Thursday. Yeah, just in 2 days. So, and it's focusing on preparing your students for the create task. And then in April, we will have a couple of more prepping for AP test type of webinars. We've got preparing for the APCSA exam. So in that one, we're going to focus more on those multiple choice questions rather than the FRQs. And then we also have preparing students for the APCSP exam coming up in April as well. So if you are an APCSP teacher and you're thinking, man, that create task one sounds good, I should be jumping into that, you can head out to codehs.com/freepd to go ahead and register for that and any others that we have. And keep an eye on that page because we are going to have a ton more workshops coming out very soon. So feel free to sign up for any and all. And thank you all so very much. We went a little long, but that's all right. We're answering good questions. So this was perfect. We absolutely loved having you all with us today. We enjoyed having all the questions and all the engagement. We so appreciate you so much. One more question, suggestions for major project resources? So are you like projects? Are you talking just projects in general or major projects for this? One place you could look is if you're looking for other projects, project catalog. So when I'm signed into CodeHS on the left-hand side of my screen, click on project catalog, and you could actually filter by Java. And this will take you through some of the projects that are available here. So this, I apologize if I misunderstood what you were asking, but this is a cool thing to point out too. So it's pretty awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much again for coming. Gary, thank you for your expertise. Thank you for being an APCSA teacher, and thank you for sharing everything you do with the whole community at large. We appreciate you so much. And I want to make sure to thank all of you. Thank all of you for being amazing APCSA dedicated teachers, because I know you're doing more than just APCSA. And it's not just, I shouldn't have worded it like that, but I know you're all teaching a lot of things. You're doing a lot. Thank you for everything you do. Have an amazing day and amazing rest of your week. And we can't wait to see you again in another workshop.
Bye, guys. Good luck.